Well, good morning. It's Monday. What's this? The fourth day in the row I'm recording a video? Yes, because most mornings or every morning when I wake up as I'm beginning to get myself into the groove for the day, I like to do art. And today I've got this frame or background I've done, frame and background I suppose, around this vintage photo. And I want to add colour. And in yesterday's video, if you've watched it, listen to it, I did witter on about using brush pens and with dye ink and so on in. But as so often happens, this morning I woke up and I thought, this is vintagey. I don't want those bright colours particularly. They perhaps would be overpowering, even though I'm going to use a damp brush to spread the colour out. With the brush pens I've got, you only need a tiny, tiny amount of ink and you have this huge amount of colour. And I thought, oh, I know what would work. I'll do my graphy tint pencils. And before I go any further, I'll say it again. I'm not paid or sponsored. I'm not given anything. Any products that I use, they're things I've bought myself, often because I'm interested or intrigued by something different and new. I've had these, well, one set of these graphy tints for many years. In fact, I've got 3 sets here because I often put things away and I can't remember I've put them away. I forgot I've had them and I buy another one. So I've got enough to last me most probably a lifetime. But they are coloured pencils, but of a different kind. They're tinted graphite, coloured graphite, and they're water soluble. And the colours are a lot more subtle, perhaps, as a result, a lot more toned down. And before I started this morning, what I did was I took a piece of the same paper that I drew on, coloured it with the same colour distress inks, tea dye, rusty hinge, aged mahogany. I didn't use vintage photo because I put a little bit of that around the edge and it disappeared basically. And these are the colours from my graphy tints I thought I'd try. Move them up a bit closer perhaps so you can see them a bit better. And you can see that some are more vivid and vibrant than others. Some are just, sort of like they're not my kind of thing because I still want some colour. So out of these, I've gone for, oddly, the first 4 I picked out: autumn brown, ivy, port and chestnut. I was toying with the idea of sage, but I thought it's a bit too browny green. Sage, it's not the colour I associate with sage leaves and dried sage, but perhaps it is dried sage, I don't know. The purple would have been quite nice for flowers, but I thought, no, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it to reddy browns because they tone in with the colours I've used in the background. And that lovely ivy there, which is a nice, it's not a warm green, it's a bit more of a grey green or a darker green. And I think that'll work nice on the foliage. Oddly, in the graphy tint, there's no sort of like yellowish tones. And that's fine. I mean, if I really wanted to use yellow in this, then I could use from another place, but I don't. And I'm going to use this brush. I like the Pro Art series ones like this. This is series 107 Pot Spotter. Short bristles, tapered points. This one's a bit used, not abused, but just used. Still works fine. They're synthetic. I object to using hairbrushes. I'm vegetarian. I'm not having any animal treated cruelty for my art. And I even now try to check art supplies to check that they are vegetarian or vegan, because there are companies that will tell you this. Yes, I know, cruelty-free art. Oh yeah, that's me. And I've just got some water and some tissue off here. I prefer a brush to a one of these water brushes. These have got their uses. I do have to say they work well in some circumstances for me. But today I only want to use a damp brush just to spread the colour out and to make a gradation in tone so that I can add the shadow and the highlight that kind of way. And I've also sharpened the pencils in advance in the hope that I won't have to sharpen them again. they don't wear down too quickly. So I'm just going to do a little bit of this today, actually, which is the one I wanted. I want this one because I want to add some colour to this golden frame. I'm just putting some around the edge because I do want to get that kind of shadow there. And if I remember rightly, and fingers crossed I do, because I should have checked this out before I started. Yeah, great to be wise in hindsight. Too late now, I did it. If it all goes to pot, well, I'm sure I can find a way to make use of it, work with it, adapt. Hide the crimes if necessary. And if the worst comes to the worst, this is just an experiment. I've got plenty other photo booth images in that pack I showed on Saturday that I could use. I'm going to put some on the other side. Yes, I could have done this at the same time without turning it all around again. Thing is, I tend to do things fairly methodically at times. I'm adding colour because I know I'm going around this bit here. See if we can get some shadow and highlight going on this one as well. Now in theory, this should come off the gold as I add water, and there we go. Just dab a bit of water off. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, that's going to work. Actually, that's really nice because that gold pen is acting as a resist. Resist means that it resists the colour and the water, and that colour will just sink into the paper around it. As I'm using the damp brush, which I will have to re-damp quite often because it is just very slightly damp. I don't want to flood this with water. It gives damp brushes a lot more control over where the colour goes and how much you spread it. And it's that control is what I want. Again, I'm working around the outside edge of this in a methodical way because I can control where it spreads, and I can try to keep it fairly consistent, but really it doesn't matter if it's not. It's charm in things being all a bit wibbly wobbly. I've just gone over the gold there and it's gone into that area outside. Am I bothered? Not one bit. Because if I have to, I can work with that as well. One of the things that art has taught me, and this was from the early days, I always remember being told by the art teacher who led me and so many other, a couple of other teachers through A-level art along with the sixth form students, was that, remember, there's no such thing as mistakes, just happy accidents. And you just think, really? Because, coming from a scientific background, experiments you have to be quite precise with. You don't make mistakes. If you make mistakes, you've got to start all over again. Or something absolutely dreadful could happen, like an explosion or poisoning yourself. So, but from a creative point of view, don't get me wrong, science is creative, but you also have to be careful with your creativity. And yet, even when things go wrong in science, you can learn something. Or, I shouldn't say wrong, unexpected. So if you know the outcome to everything, you never learn anything new. So the unexpected outcomes raise questions which you can then investigate and gain a deeper understanding in one way or another. Though if you poison yourself and you're dead, it's a bit late. So caution is needed as well. But this way of thinking forces some creativity in what you do with it. Yeah. Now that already has added some it's added that. And yeah, I can't think of my words, but I haven't lost any of the gold. It's just that colour that's behind it that helps that to stand out a little bit more as gold, to read that way. I do want to do some colour around the next one, and I'm going to go for port. Yeah, why not? But I'm going to add colour in a different way here, because I don't want, just want to bring some shadows in places and highlights. This is one of my favourite ways to add colour around a frame. It's not realistic. It's about pennies dropped. I think it was when I was watching a Entangled video a while back about how the shadows and highlights that are added to Entangled drawings aren't meant to be realistic. They're meant to be part of a pattern. So light source isn't important, but the pattern and the repetition and the repeat of lines and shapes is the important thing in Zentangle, because that's what makes it Zentangling, I suppose, is that it's that use of, just a couple of simple lines or curves, simple shapes, and the way that by combining those and repeating them, you get these patterns. And it's something that anybody can do, and it gives a structure, a framework that gives people the confidence to be creative within, because that too is also important. If you don't know where to start with art, or if you haven't got the confidence, then having those rules, for want of a better word, I suppose, or guidelines, is really, really helpful. It gives you that confidence in knowing what to do and how to do it and what's expected of you, and within those limits there's an endless amount of creativity. And I mentioned the elegance of limits and how limitations can, force is the wrong word, but encourage perhaps creativity. And of course one day the hope is that people will step outside of those limits for themselves and embark on their own journey. Zentangle is a voice, but it's about making your own voice as well. But it's learning and adapting. That's not exactly what I wanted, but hey ho. It's one of these cases where, oh, what have I done that for? But we move on and we work with it. So there's that. And I may actually need to pick another colour eventually. This one is chestnut, which is a more golden colour. Golden brown, I think. And with this one, I'm definitely going to pay attention here to where this goes under these leaves. Okay, with these pencils, they are really quite highly pigmented, and a little really does go a long way, as you've seen with the port second one I did, second border line area, as it spread far further than I wanted it to, but that's okay. Happy little accidents. In the grand scheme of things, it'll almost probably look fine, especially once I get some more of that colour in places. You can see how far that has spread with just a little bit of water. Crazy. Well, it's not at all crazy. The other thing with this is the distress inks are water reactive. So whenever they get damp, they reactivate. So that means that the underlying distress ink is becoming mixed in with colour. So it's very subtle, but it changes the colour of the pencil just that little bit and becomes part of it. That's really nice. is just bringing that tiny bit of colour down, and it just adds to it. I don't think I'm going to make this a long video today, or if I do, I'm going to speed up parts, or perhaps, you know, stop and start as I do different parts so you can see what I'm doing exactly. So that's the first thing's done, and colour makes such a difference. It looks quite bright under the camera, but I don't think it's quite that bright in colour here. It's the problem with scanning and photographs and things, they can intensify colours and you don't get a true view of them. Okay, I'm going for green because I've got these leaves that are calling out to me that need some. See how this is going to work. So yes, a happy accident. So realism, when I choose, I say realism, this isn't going for realism at all, but when I choose colours for a palette, I try to, for a limited colour palette, I usually stick to 4 colours, sometimes 5 basic colours, and then I can add tones and what's the other one? It's tints and tones. I think tints are where you add white and tones are where you add black. So lighter and darker versions. I could be wrong. Or is it tints is the amount of pigment, colour is in it? Do you know, I don't know. It's just colour. Some are darker, some are lighter. Some are more intense, some are less intense in colour, but perhaps more intense in shadow or whatever. So I tend to put 4, sometimes 5, depending on what I need. So if I want to, I can always add that extra colour. This green is nice because because the areas are so much bigger than those frames. The colour really is able to fade out. And where there's less distressing on the paper, you get to see more of that green tone. Up here, you'll see where there's a lot of distressing and the end's brown. Fine with that, it's not a problem. It's just accepting that's how it's going to be on this paper. And that's what adds the interest. Perhaps it's, you know, makes it more grungy or vintagey or whatever you want to describe this. And normally on a Monday, I create a mandala. And I'll be carrying on with that. I'll be doing that afterwards. Usually start the day with some kind of art that is just for fun. Say just for fun, because all art is fun, but in the morning it is to get my eyes, hand, brain, and thinking brain and mouth into some kind of order. I think I'm going to perhaps need a second green. But that's okay because I can dig that out. I think I might use the yeah, I've got meadow I could use. It's a bit bright. Sage would be quite nice, I think. Okay. But you can see that even just that little bit of green, I think you can see, it's just bringing some life into that. Did you know that the most popular paint, or not paint, but wallpaper during Victorian times, and the green they used in that paper had arsenic in it, and it was the cause of many people dying from accidental arsenic poisoning by soaking it up over a long period of time. And of course it was also used for nefarious deeds to off people who somebody didn't want them around anymore, you know, dead. Just, you know, one of those random facts about green that popped into my head. As things do. Sign of me and my science teacher or my teaching background, I'm endlessly curious. Even now, although my curiosity tends to be of a visual nature a lot of times, I look at things, and it doesn't matter if it's briefly, there's still a kind of analysis going on in my head of shapes and forms and patterns and the way light and shadow land and how I could simplify such things. But I'm still curious about facts. If I don't know the answer to something, I'll happily look it up. And I can get quite a lot of pleasure out of digging into QI books. QI stands for quite interesting. It's a television series over here in the UK. I haven't seen many of the most modern series because I don't watch much television generally. I prefer to pick and choose what and when I watch. But QI used to be hosted by Stephen Fry, who's one of my favourite authors and people in the world. Such an interesting person. And a polymath, I guess. And endlessly curious himself about things. And 4 panellists in 2 teams who compete against each other with all of these really obscure pieces of information and facts. Of course, the QI team, the QI elves, as they're known, the researchers behind the team, have brought out a number of books full of interesting facts about, which are just compendia. I don't know which it is. If I remember, that's something for me to look up. Of interesting facts. And some are themed. There's one about life and death, I think there is. And so on. And of course, there's other books by different groups of people of a similar genre. But they're just so interesting to dig into because they are full of interesting facts that you maybe didn't know. You go, really? One of my favourites ever is that wombats poop cubes. They do. Their poop is cube shaped. Not sharp edged, but it's got a definite shape, cubish shape about it. And I think it's got something to do with them marking territory, where they poop on, sort of like stones or branches slightly above the ground. And so their poop doesn't roll off. Mind you, that could be a complete figment of my imagination. But that is one piece of information that sticks, and I just, I'd have to go and look the rest up because things, come into the forefront of my mind from time to time, and I go, oh, yes, I knew that. Friends at the school I worked at often used to say that if they were ever on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they didn't know the answer to some really obscure fact or information or science, I'd be their phone a friend, but they wouldn't bother asking me about current affairs, sports, television, anything like that, because I hadn't got a clue. And I was quite useful in pub quizzes, it seems, according to the long ago ex, because I knew this random stuff that nobody else did. They had to deal with all the day-to-day stuff and, more common stuff, but I was there for the science and the weird, or what they considered weird things that I found interesting. And to be honest with you, nothing has changed. One of the things I do find really interesting is the history of words and where they came from. I particularly like it. It's called etymology, and it's so interesting. There's so many words we use that have such a long history and different countries that they come from. And I'm talking about English here, obviously, that it's just endlessly fascinating, and the common words and the roots of them. Yeah, I know. I could be considered particularly geeky, I think. What colour did I want? Meadow Sage. Let me have a look. I want to try a different colour here because that one, no, this one will work, I think. So I'm going to make an awful noise as I sharpen my pencil, and my table's likely to squeak more than usual. Yeah, I've got one of these pencil sharpeners. I've had it for a number of years. Don't give me the ones with holes in. This means that pencils go in, they get sharpened, and the leads don't break as often because the pencil is kept, doesn't wobble around in the hole or whatever, it's kept rigid. This is slate green. I just wanted a slightly darker colour on the vein of the leaves. What is nice about using a little bit of colour as well is that I could do this by adding lots of lines, you know, hatching and patterns of lines to make some areas of the design in pen darker than others, to help separate them one from another, to bring a bit more structure and form, if that's the right words. So I'm mostly self-taught as an artist, so don't have formal training in the theory of things, I just work. I'm sure theory can help, but when I'm working, apart from when I'm doing videos, I don't actually spend much time thinking or analysing in a conscious kind of way, I suppose, and so any knowledge, you know, it's got to be there. I'm sure I've talked about it in the past with people, or you know, had lessons on it, but there's the contrast that you have in areas, that actually works quite nicely. It's very subtle, but it's enough to make it a bit different and to pick those, you know, separate those a little bit. Oop, missed one. Before I move on, got to do that. I did just add just a little bit, because that slate green, which is this one, it's quite an intense colour. Well, they all can be, but I want something that's just that little bit more it's a bit more subtle, I suppose. So less pencil, less pigment, less colour. Simple. There we go. So that's this on the, you know, I've made a start here. I'm trying to decide what to do about those flowers. I think, because I really don't have any yellow tones, and I really don't want to use a different kind of pencil or different colour, you know, different type of colouring implement medium. There we are. Told you. It's 7:25 in the morning here. I've been working at this I started this before 7 o'clock, so there is no hope for me today. But to use different media would change the type of colour I'm getting, I suppose, or that quality of the graphite that's here. Goodness knows how Derwent make these, because they are Derwent. But there is just something so nice about the toning down of colours in this way, and there's something magical about when you add water, suddenly those colours come to life. Because without water, the colours are very, very subtle and very dull, I suppose, and very, you know, they can be quite samey. But as soon as you add that water, those colours come to life in quite a pleasing way, to be honest with you. I like that. So let me have a look. Where did I put that one? What's there? Yeah, I've been really clever today because I've got my bifocals on. And clever is being sarcastic, because that means that I haven't got that intermediate distance, so things are just going very, very Strange, yeah. Wobble my mouse because my screensaver came on. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm looking I'm adding the pencil in the opposite corner, opposite area of the flower. This means that I'll have an intensity of colour in the centre at the bottom and an intensity colour of this second ring at the top. And that separates them as well. And why I never made the connection between the fact I use colour not for realism, but to create pattern, an added pattern in things in my work like this. I don't know. Sometimes it takes somebody to say it out loud and I go, that's exactly what I do. So I've done all the time. What's nice though, when you hear somebody else say it, and it gives you a kind of validation, because you develop your own way, and perhaps I'm conscious that I am mostly self-taught as an artist. I haven't been to university, studied any kind of art. I've been to university, but it was science. But then I've got a lifetime experience of observation and observational drawing from science, and diagrams and things like that, and messing around from time to time with things like cartoons and comic-y styles in my own way. So there's a wealth of experience there. Creating displays in my room at school was a very creative kind of thing to do. I had always very bright and colourful, and I always wanted my notice boards painted black, which caused consternation amongst the caretakers. But when they saw what I'd done, they said, okay, you were right. And it covered with pupils' work, bright posters, information, loads of colours, because I wanted that kind of vibrant room. I wanted to be surrounded by vibrancy and colour, not drabness. I determined that it wasn't going to be sort of like, in inverted commas, institutional in any kind of way. So it's getting there. And what am I going to do with those blessed flowers? I could use the port, but I really do think I may go with this very subtle purple. Well, it seems to be subtle. Where is it? It's there. Juniper. Because I like purple, and it's me going, I'm not realistic. No, but that little bit of colour I think there is just what's needed, and everything else would be shades, so it's probably grey and brown. So let's add some. If I do one, I can see if I like it. And if I don't like it, as long as I should be able to lift it. Because these, oh gosh, that's so subtle. Try the next door one. Let's add a bit more. And see how this, is it making any difference at all? Did these ones here? Hardly any difference. Let me just do the whole lot, because it may be that I may need quite a bit of this juniper for it to show. And when I colour it on, you can see that it's there, can't you? Definitely visible, but I think it's so water soluble, contrast to some of the others, that perhaps I'm picking the colour up in the water on my brush, you see. That may be okay. That perhaps is what's needed. And I can certainly do that. That's something else you can do with colour pencils, is you can use the brush and pick the colour up directly from the tip of the colour pencil. As long as it's water soluble, obviously. Yes. Now that is an unusual kind of colour there, but it is a contrast to the others. But oddly, as purpley as this can be, that background of the distress ink is adding that browner tone, I think, to it. Very muted colour, very soft, but it's enough to add that bit of variation there that I'm looking for. And of course, it's that shadow is what I want really around it. There are things I can do to bring highlights to the tips. White gel pens like a Jelly Roll or the Uniball Signos are fab. The Posca paint pens, the white is fabulous. And because I think it's an acrylic ink that's in it, or an acrylic paint, it doesn't tend to pick colour up as long as the colour, you know, if the colour you've put down is water soluble, it still tends not to pick it up and become discoloured with it. As long as you're, you know, it depends how you use it, I think, but certainly for putting dots on, it works nicely. So there's that actually tones in really quite nicely. So it's a subtle difference. I think if I'd used port or the autumn brown here, it would have been just perhaps a bit too samey. You know, if I was doing this completely monochrome and using just one coloured pencil to add the shadow and you know, leave the highlights, then it would be different, but I've chosen to use different colours, so I'm up to 6 now, which is fine. Sort of got 2 of each kind of colour. You've got 2 greeny colours, 2 browns, and a purple and a red-ish colour. Port is a red, but it's got more of that purple vibe going about it. So more on the bluer side of red than the orange side of red, or yellow side. Cooler rather than warmer, which is fine. I prefer those. I say I prefer those reds. I'm actually not sure. See, my brush is a bit too wet there, and I've lost some of that colour. But you know what? We'll go with it because it'll work. That there needs a little bit of colour. And then let's do these. It doesn't need much colour much water to activate it, this one, and it is really, really moving with the water, which is fine. There's enough there that we get that little bit of a shadow, so it gives it some dimension. Okie doke, so I've done that. Yeah, I'm leaving this year because I don't know what I want to do with that yet. My mind is ticking over it. So let's have a look. I am going to do, I've got this lovely autumn brown here. This is a lovely, beautiful red brown. And I want to use that in these. Yeah, they're leaf-like, but, you know, perhaps this is an autumn leaf. Autumn tones, because they are quite autumnal. Fall for you in America and in other places around the world, no doubt. Of course, here in the UK, we're coming into spring. The southern hemisphere, you're in autumn, fall. Nature of the world. Yep, there's science to it, but I'm not going to explain that because I'll end up drawing diagrams and it won't be art. Yep, I had to teach about that as well. As you can imagine, I had to teach about a lot of things. Oh, I'm not sure if some of my ink there moved. To be careful around, yeah, it did. I have to be careful around these areas where I've coloured in black because that ink will move. It's thicker layer, so perhaps it still hasn't dried properly yet. But that's okay. If it does, it does. I'll just add that little bit of variation here and there. There we go. That's why I'm trying not to work this too much, because the pens are waterproof, but water resistant, not necessarily waterproof. So they still need to be worked with gently when you add water-based media on the top of them. And as I'm moving colour around, brushing, then I just need to be aware of that. It's okay. So it's, you know, one of those things, and if it happens again, then, you know, 2 or 3 times, and it doesn't look like an accident anymore, it looks deliberate. So and it would only be if somebody pointed it out that you might even notice it. So I've pointed it out, so forget I've pointed that one out. I see such amazing work done by people with all kinds of media where they use layers and layers of colour to create an amazing depth of almost reality, texture. And I guess I've worked like that. But I think, you know, thinking back to the early days of my artistic exploration, as you know, when I was doing this A-level art, even then I'd often choose to use quite simple, you know, dark, mid, light toned, and perhaps have coloured paper or black paper. I used to love drawing on black paper with white and, you know, lighter coloured pencils to you know, focusing on bringing that sense of dimensionality to my work. And there is, as far as I'm concerned, I love people who use lots of colours, and perhaps I try to do that from time to time, but when I use lots of colours, unless it's something completely and totally whimsical like doodle worlds, I do end up feeling that it just doesn't work, or it's just not right. But when I use a limited palette or monochrome and focus on contrast and getting that contrast to give a sense of volume, dimension, as crafters call it, volume, to my work, I get so much more satisfaction out of it. In the same way I can if I do a pure pen and ink drawing where I use the intensity of line or pattern to add that sense of dimension again, weight of line. And I think it takes me a long time, or it's taking me a long time to really settle into this idea of this is me. You know, when I'm doing work for colouring books, then I have to colour in sample templates, and I feel that I need to do them in, you know, colours that would inspire and palettes that you might be able to make use of. And I'm not quite sure that my love of monochrome and limited palettes would work, although in the book I'll be doing, perhaps I will work on that. Because it could be interesting. Oh, this is interesting because I think I've used a different pencil. Have I? No. Yeah, I have for this, I think. Oh, great. But pay attention, Angela. Yeah, I've used port, I think, instead of the autumn brown. I picked it up by mistake. Oh, it doesn't matter. because what will happen, I'll just use this elsewhere. Perhaps I've just put more pencil down so I've got more intense colour. No, it's, yeah, perhaps I have. Perhaps I did use, no, it doesn't look the same colour. Be fine. If I have, all I'll need to do is just go back. Oh gosh, I really have put a lot of pigment down here in this. But that's fine, because it means that I get an intenser area and I can pull that colour out in very tiny amounts to add that contrast. I think subconsciously, because I was talking about it. But yeah, so the more I do with just limited colour palettes or monochrome colours, the more I'm realising this is the way. Yeah. This is the way. Sorry, just got lost then in the Mandalorian for a moment. Yeah, anybody who knows me will know I absolutely love Star Wars. I've got so many books to read, so many series of the Clone Wars to watch and other things. But oh gosh, that's way too much water there. That'd be alright. Get too much water, dry your brush off on a piece of paper towel and quickly use it to pick it up. Pick up the excess. Dry brush is a thirsty brush. So yes, this is the way. That's definitely a different colour. Oh, it doesn't matter. It just means that I'll use both colours elsewhere or mix and match. Can't be picking up the background ink because there's not a huge amount here. I bet it's enough to tint the paper. Having that tinted, pre-tinting the paper, adding that background colour. I was adding water somewhere, I think it was there. For me, it's a nice way to work. Even when I work digitally, that stark white paper on the screen, and I start adding colour, and I'm never satisfied with what I do. But as soon as I put a piece of digitally background coloured texture behind, suddenly it all comes together for me. And I do that even when I'm adding colour to colouring templates, because I will do that digitally because I can adjust things and alter if I need to, which is not so easy when you're working like this, because whatever happens here you have to go with, which is also a good thing in its way, because it means that you become creative with any mistakes or anything that you perceive as a mistake. Last couple here. You've seen, I've gone, oh well, different colour, doesn't matter. I'll just make sure that I do that elsewhere. I'm not entirely sure that it is a different colour. It may just be that I put more colour down on this one, because I can see the colours here are very similar, so it might be me panicking over nothing there. So that's those. For these ones, I do think I'm going to use greens, but I'm going to start, what I'm going to do with, I think, is use the darker green here, and I'm going to bring lighter green in places, but I still want to use that darker green under here to give that shadow. So I want that feeling. This is sort of like something that's curled over. the leaf or whatever hasn't fully opened yet. So let's see how this works. May not be able to get this right, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, that'll do. And then this needs to be darkest there. We don't need too much colour there, but down around the bottom is where. And then I get that highlight. Does that work? It'll do. Because again, when this is dried, I can always go back with more colour. I don't want to do it in wet because too much colour will settle onto the damp paper. It'll pick up more of the pencil than I want it to. So I'm just doing this until one at a time until I get that feel that I've got it as I'd like it to be. That one's the easy bit, as is this one. Yeah, I'm not cleaning my brush in between the colours because I do want them to mix and blend. Is that going to work? I think so. I think so. Now, the only thing I haven't got a colour for is this here. And I think for that one, I think I'm going to use that chestnut. I think so, because it'll be a lighter tone than these. Stand up. Yeah. Let's have a look. Did I say stand up? Stand out or feel separate from these. I know it's going to be the same colour as this border, but things will be a bit different here. I'm adding colour at each edge of the arcs. Don't know if you can see where there are distinct arcs. And the lovely thing about this is I don't have to be precise about where I put the colour. Another advantage for working the way I do. Don't have to be precise about adding colour and blending and things, because the brush will do that for me as if by magic. You can see I'm just putting it at the ends or the edges where there would be the most. This is where some realism comes in, I suppose, some logic of light, is that these areas where I'm putting colour in are areas that are likely to be darker in shadow because they're being overlapped by something else. So the leaf here is overlapping this, and this little arch is overlapping that arch. So there's some kind of logic here, which goes against what I said about I don't often pay attention to light sources. Well, I'm not, because I'm just adding shadow wherever there's an overlap, which wouldn't necessarily be the case depending on where the light's coming from. So it's still forming a pattern, and it's still being consistent with that pattern throughout. I do understand light sources and shadows and things. It's just sometimes I just can't be bothered with it. Well, a lot of the time, because this is a pattern rather than a realistic drawing. And sometimes I find it hard to come to grips with that, because I still feel the pressure of, we're taught that if you draw, it's got to look like a photograph. The heck it has. But it starts, I think, in primary school, where you're told the sky's blue, so the sky's up there and the sun's a big round yellow ball, and you have to draw it like that. And of course, yeah, the sun is big and yellowish, but it depends what time of day, and it depends what cloud conditions there are, and time of year, and sunrises and sunsets can be glorious. But and you begin to believe that if you're going to be good at art, you've got to be able to draw things in a hyper-realistic way, like a photograph. That was my experience, and I wasn't really interested in that. And when I was 13 to 14, the last year before I started O-levels in school, secondary school, I'm still doing lots of subjects. You didn't have a choice what you did. You studied lots, and then at the end of that particular year, the year when you turn 14, you decide on what subject you're going to study for my day. It was O-levels. Now it's GCSEs, and no doubt that will change eventually, because why if something works and people are doing well at it, the government says no, we've got to change that because it's too many people are doing too well, perhaps, or who knows. That's educational thing. Constant change may not be quite so good, and the focus of what education is may not be the best kind of thing for education, to be honest with you, or for young people. Anyway, I was talking about teaching. Oh yeah, and so in this year I had a different art teacher to what I'd had in my first 2 years, and all we did that year was do pencil drawings of the hand, your own hand, each and every week. And I can think of nothing more tedious or boring to do. There was not even a variation in the colour of paper, the type of paper, the media you could use. And the pencils were always whatever you happen to have. So, back in the day, as today, unless you were serious about art, it was just some ordinary pencil, which are not the best for drawing with, especially if you want to get shading and so on. And you couldn't use pen, weren't allowed to use anything else. I lost interest in art, I suppose. I'd also had bought for me for my 13th birthday, my older sister bought me a rotary pen, 0.35, which was fab because I loved handwriting, and this was perfect for drawing graphs as well and doing illustrations and diagrams in my notes. Some teachers wouldn't let me use it because it had to be done in pencil. Others said, carry on, you're doing a great job. And so at the end of this year, I was told there was no way I was going to be allowed to do art, to go back to the hand drawing and art, because I was absolutely useless at it. Well, yeah, because you give me something I was going to fail at, and I'm not interested in. I'm not really interested in drawing humans. For whatever reason, we're all different. Nature, architecture, things like that really interest me. And so I was told there's no way I'd be allowed to do an O-level art, not that I wanted to, that I was useless at art, which I believed until, nearly 20 years ago. And what an awful thing to do to a child. Art has changed since then. I do have to say that. There's a lot more exploration, and there is a use in learning, copying and examining other people's works of art and how they work, and filling your visual vocabulary, your creative vocabulary up. But, there we are. So, this is an hour. I've done quite well for an hour for me colouring, because it takes me a while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video here, and the next one I'll make it a time lapse where I don't talk and I just finish adding colour to this, and perhaps do a bit of a talk at the end of, what I did, how I did it, or whether I'm happy with it or not. It's different anyway. I'm not entirely sure I've chosen the right things, because this here is now at that point where I'm going, oh, why did I bother doing this? I always get to that point in a piece of art. I think, oh, really, did I really have to? And then I push forward and it all works out in the end. It may not be exactly what I wanted, but it's good enough, I think, is the answer. And it's learning about things and how things would work for me. So I'll say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. A bit different for me. I don't normally colour much. It's usually digitally. But enjoy the rest of your day, week, or however long it is until you watch this. And I hope you come back to see what the end result of this is and the passion drawing I've been doing on Fridays. And please check out my social media. I'm at Artword at most of them, if not all of them. And if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. And feedback, comments, suggestions for future videos, leave us comments. I'll always do my best to answer them. At the moment, because I'm such a small channel, it's easy for me to do so. Maybe not quickly, but I get there eventually. So for those of you who've left messages, thank you very much. Subscribers, thank you very much for subscribing. And for those who click the like, thank you very much. Take care now. Bye-bye.